If you have a feeling in you that you're in a room of great intelligence or action-oriented people, that's a good thing. If you're in the room and everything's just real comfortable and you're flipping your pen around and you're not having to really pay attention that hard because you're already down the road mentally, then you're probably in the wrong room.
Welcome to Leadership and Motivation Unleashed, practical leadership for modern workplaces. A podcast where we explore actionable strategies to help you lead with confidence, build cohesive teams, and create thriving workplace cultures.
We're here for the career-focused professionals climbing the corporate ladder, the managers navigating team dynamics, and the leaders shaping the future of work. In each episode, we'll break down challenges, share practical advice, and leave you with insights you can apply today.
I'm Patrick Law, your co-host, a Gulf War veteran with over 26 years of corporate leadership experience in banking and payments, blending precision and innovation with a tad of passion to solve big challenges.
And I'm Rachel Book, a C-suite trusted advisor and an HR leader with 2 decades of experience at Fortune 50 companies, specializing in building people-first strategies and driving impactful talent solutions.
Together, Rachel and I, we combine operational expertise and transformational leadership to bring you real-world advice on leadership, workplace culture, team dynamics, career growth, and anything else that we may want to delve into.
So, if you're ready to take your career and leadership skills to the next level, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. Good morning, Rachel. How are you today?
I am well. How are you?
Very good. I'm great. It's been a good week. It's Friday. It's going to be a nice weekend in Dallas-Fort Worth. Hope the same for you in downstate New York or northern New Jersey. How do I say it?
I think either works. It's kind of rainy and gloomy.
They're also everything's so bunched up there.
Well, everyone in New Jersey likes to pretend that they're in New York for some reason. Did you notice that? Like even I do it. I'll say, I'm in New Jersey, right outside of New York.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Yeah. That's right. All right. So we're going to talk about the difference in our opinions between working at a big company and a small company. And we may drift into the definition. We don't have I don't, maybe Rachel does, a scientific definition of large and not so large companies. I have numbers in my head of employees or revenue, and we can talk about that for a bit. But I kind of want to talk about the social side of it and the execution side of it and what it feels like and then what things are the same. So do you want to jump in first, Rachel? And
of course. And I would also add on the impacts to your career choices, right? Between big companies and small companies. But, Patrick has talked a lot about his background. He's worked at both big companies and small companies. I've mostly worked at big companies. So early in my career, I worked for a startup. It was during the time when every company was going public. It was a small technology startup that actually was one of the first companies to do telephone calls over the computer. Like what we're doing now, minus the video, was groundbreaking, right, in 1998.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
That company was a subsidiary of its
12.
Well,
you were 12, so you had all kinds of hot sports opinions about technology.
I kind of was 12. I didn't tell you how old it was, though. That was a small company that was a subsidiary of a larger company, still not nearly as large as those that I worked for afterwards. But that experience was unique in that I got to do a lot of things, right? Because there weren't so many people who worked there. So one of the differentiators, I think, in working at a small company and a big company is you get to be more of a generalist rather than a specialist, which is awesome for some people, and for others, they may not appreciate that as much. Most of my career was at very, very large corporations. I worked at AT&T, I worked at Fidelity Investments, and a few others. These are companies that had upwards of 50,000 or 200,000 employees around the country and around the world. And so the career experience, the social experience, the resources that were available were of a completely different scale than where Patrick and I work now, which is a company of about 200 employees. Much, much, much smaller, right? With very different dynamics and with very different goals. A lot of people ask me, what was it like moving from bigger companies to smaller companies? A lot of people who we interview and consider to work for us asked me that question too, right? How do I know that I can succeed in a smaller company? What are some things that I should keep in mind? And, like with everything in life, there's pluses and minuses, which aren't necessarily the same for everyone. So it's really important to understand what the differences are in the environments and what you're getting into. And then think whether that's something that you think would be exciting for you and whether it's the best fit for what's going on in your life at whatever point in time, and also for your career aspirations. So I'll give a couple of quick highlights and then Patrick, turn it over to you. So, in smaller companies, one thing that's really, really awesome about smaller companies is you get to do things that you may not be able to get in bigger companies, right? Sometimes that's because in bigger companies, there's already 27 or 27,000 people who do exactly that job. Sometimes it's because you need 27 rounds of approval before anyone will let you do the thing. And then sometimes even when you do the thing, you don't even get to experience or appreciate the results of it or see your hard work come to life until much, much, much later. Sometimes you have to wait a quarter, or you have to wait a year, or you have to wait till the annual report is published. And even then, your little piece of whatever accomplishment has been produced might be a single line item, or the fact that some software program runs 0.007% of a second faster than it used to, right? So being part of such a large machine can sometimes make your own individual accomplishments feel a little bit diminished. When you work at a smaller company, you feel your impact every single day. Now, that comes along with a lot of hard work. It comes along with figuring things out, right? Doing things that are outside of your comfort zone, having parts of your job that maybe you never signed up for, right? Or you said, hey, I don't even know how to do this, or I never had to do this, or I used to have other people to do this for me. But in smaller companies, you get to do it yourself, which also can feel really great. Because for many people who are experienced in their careers and who've been removed from rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, and really getting into the work, getting back into that, gets you back to your roots. And it may remind you why you started doing this in the first place. And it might give you some additional perspective on actually how the work gets done, as opposed to sitting high up on your ivory tower and pontificating about the philosophies of whatever it is your work is. So, I think that's one little nuance. There's a couple more, but I'd love to hear your thoughts first, Patrick.
Yeah, that was really good stuff and painted a really clear picture. For people who are visual and listen to us and then paint a picture in their head, that should help some people understand. But there's nothing like putting the fire hose in your mouth, right? We can talk about this stuff forever, but until you actually do it yourself, you don't know actually what it's like. But I'll try to put some texture around it. So the first place I worked I'm rounding and it's been a minute, right? But call it 15,000 employees, which isn't small. But the division I was in, there were 250 of us, also rounding. And the types of businesses I grew up in for a long time weren't core to the company I worked for. Meaning, like ACS was a BPO, or business process outsourcing. They competed against EDS and Perot Systems and Unisys, document imaging businesses. One of them there was called Dataplex. Lots of big email outsourcing with the government stuff, right? Like outsourcing things. And part of that outsourcing was an ATM and debit platform. And there was 250 of us taking care of hundreds and hundreds of banks around the Southwest. And it kind of takes on an identity of its own inside a culture. And I've talked about this before, but in some businesses, there's cultures inside of cultures. So the mothership was BPO, and we were over here doing ATM and debit. And we kind of had our own language. We had our own behaviors. The group president kind of ran the place. I mean, she reported up to the CEO of the mothership, but we kind of had our own little thing carved out. And then a venture capital group ended up in our life, and that was small. There was 220 of us with a group out of Chicago that funded the company and expected a return. And, the dynamics of that changed for sure, because the first company went public, and then you got to learn all new words and behaviors and disciplines and accountability, because now you're publicly traded. The VC company was really wild, wild west. Now, the VCs probably wouldn't say that, but the people who worked in it, it was a lot of wild west. And like you said, you got to do a lot of things that you may not know how to do. Like, we moved buildings and we needed a generator. I've never installed the generator before. I didn't have to physically do it, but there was a lot of project management work and stuff and language and telecommunications. And I mean, we basically built a company from scratch that already had 100 million in revenue. And I thought it was exciting. I remember clearly some people are like, I don't like this. I don't understand. What are we doing? It's so chaotic. I mean, there's such a thing as controlled chaos. And then if you skip ahead, I worked at US Bank because they bought that VC business. And that was 70,000 people. And embarrassingly, when US Bank bought us, I'd never heard of US Bank. I just hadn't. And it's a big bank. You see them on NBC Sports now. All the golf tournaments they sponsor, and they're kind of everywhere. But back then, they were in 30 states from a branch perspective. I was in Texas, so we knew like Bank One and Chase. I'm dating myself a little bit. B of A, Wells, what you would normally see in a large metropolitan area down here, and having to get used to rules. And I'll tell a story here in a minute of the differences. And then Fiserv, who had 40,000 plus employees, publicly traded. So for 19 years, I worked at two big Fortune 150 types. My first 9 years were smaller. And now, as you said, at Checkout, back to the GenPass days, if you want to call it that, where you wear a lot of hats and you have a lot more control and your decisions land harder sooner. So if you go back to US Bank, Hurricane Katrina had just happened. Hurricane Rita followed. That one doesn't often get the press that Katrina does or the bad memories, but it was pretty devastating to the Texas coast. We had I'll leave some of the customer names off because in today's world it wouldn't go over well, but we had a really large financial institution that had many ATMs along the coast that ended up being underwater. I mean, we were hiring salvage divers to dive for the cash because it was underwater, and the crooks are smarter than the honest people. They were already in the water, ripping these ATMs open. The hurricane hadn't even left yet. I mean, people are really smart, and we had to protect our investment. Well, at a company like GenPass, the VC company, I just start picking up the phone and calling contacts I had to help. Well, at US Bank, remember that was right around the transition. They didn't do that. Like there was a chain of command, and even though I was a big player in a small pond at GenPass at US Bank, I was a small player in a big pond. And that brain shift as a leader was hard for me. I didn't rules. What are you talking about? Just pick up the phone and call. And if you're listening and you've only ever worked at a big company, you're probably like, well, yeah. I mean, you got to ask 13 people. But this was pretty much an urgent situation on the coast. And this big bank wanted not only to get their money out, but to drive money down and hand it out to their cardholders. So imagine today doing that. But the big bank was like, just figure it out, Patrick, and get a van full of money down there and check their ID and see if they have a XYZ bank debit card or ATM card or whatever they had. And then if they need money, give it to them. We're about our consumers. So we had a van literally in the garage of our building with the bank's logo on it. We called the Fed. They gave us money. We put it in the van. It was millions of dollars. And I asked two guys that worked for me to drive it down there. Drive down to Galveston and hand out money. Could you imagine today doing that? Well, our customer was ecstatic. Thank you, Patrick. Oh, you always come through. Your team is so wonderful. All the stuff. And for us, that was normal behavior. We did stuff like that all the time. Hell, I was buying generators by the pallet on my card and expensing it. And we had our employees driving generators into Louisiana to help people after Katrina on behalf of this bank who also had ATMs, in Mississippi, Alabama, and New Orleans. Because so many people were devastated. They wanted people to have power and money, and we were just doing it. Well, I started submitting my expense reports through the bank, and they were like, what are these thousands of dollars of generators? I'm like, what? Like, well, Patrick, you can't just go buy what you want. What do you mean? So that's an odd story to tell in terms of differences of big company, little company. Now, big companies aren't heartless completely, but they have structure for a reason. There's a lot at stake. Shareholder value, brand, all the stuff that, even though our hearts are in the right place, what if somebody got hurt driving millions of dollars down to the Gulf Coast and it was just a big mindset shift, or spending money that wasn't budgeted? I mean, we had budgets at GenPass and this ACS, but the mindset was whatever it takes to make the customer good. Don't worry about it, Patrick. Just if you need to do it, do it. But at the bank, the empowerment went away. And I think that's the word, empowerment. Now, big companies will say, you're empowered to do the right thing by the customer, but here's your rule book of 500 things. At the smaller companies, it's, Patrick, do the right thing for everybody, and here's your rule book. And the differences of those things is, I believe, courageousness. I kept my courageousness and just who I am as a person. I don't mean I'm going to go storm a beach. I just meant like my decision-making and my kind of my style and the way I communicate with people is I just put it out there. Well, I didn't change my behavior at US Bank, and it got me a reputation. Like the lead controller for the whole bank, she managed every penny in the place. And this was a multi-billion-dollar bank. It was huge. Called me the Maverick in Texas. Because I would just say things on conference calls like, well, what do you mean? Don't have another meeting, just do it. We all just decided, do it. And that behavior got me nicknamed a Maverick. Now, I don't believe I was being a Maverick. I was taking the initiative. I was leading from the front. I was showing some courageousness with my career and the bank's reputation to do the right thing. So if you come up in that kind of environment, you don't know any better. Just like the companies I started with, which were a fluke, I didn't know any better. So choose your poison where you want to start. Are you this is going to sound way worse than I intended, but are you a freedom-loving person? Or do you need structure like every minute of the day and 32 pages of rules to make a decision, and you need training? I need more training. I just want to make sure I get it perfect. Or are you okay with it being good enough? Like perfect is the version of the devil. Like sometimes it is okay to be good enough because it's forward momentum. And are you a fleet of foot as an individual? Can you play on a team that is fleet of foot to make decisions on the fly? I'll draw a mental image for people not looking at us and you're just listening. So when I was a pilot, there were times where you could come off your flight plan. And I'm not going to get into all the detail of that, but you could reach out to air traffic and say, look, blah, 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 and just kind of maneuver where you want as long as it's safe and you're in certain areas. No one's doing this over metropolitan New York, everybody, or Dallas, Fort Worth. You got to be out. You got to be out. And one of my favorite things to do is to fly around the clouds. I didn't always like to go through them because clouds are vapor, but it still creates a little bit of turbulence when you hit them because it's vapor. The aircraft is going to hit something, nothing that's going to take it down. It's hitting vapor, so there's a little bup. A lot of guys enjoyed that, but I actually liked sailing the aircraft around. Now, there's no passengers on board. I was coming home deadhead from freight or whatever. So I just enjoyed doing that. I always saw corporate America a little bit like that. I enjoy not punching through the clouds, which I would consider bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. I liked having the stick in my hand, autopilot off, and as long as it was safe for people on the ground, and I wasn't doing acrobatics, I just meant particularly in the Northeast where I flew out of Rochester and all over New Jersey and blah, blah. And particularly in the spring and summer, those thunderstorms create plumes, right? That's what I call them. And I like sailing around them. And they're called Victor Airways on maps, and they're invisible to the naked eye, but everyone's flying these airways. I didn't like staying on the airway and popping through those things because it wasn't always comfortable, and plus it's not as cool. So that mindset drifted into corporate America. Give me the stick. I want to fly it.
Yes.
So if you like being a passenger, the big companies are probably better. Now, that doesn't mean leadership at big companies don't have control of the stick. It just means the course corrections you're making at a bigger company aren't felt as much to the people in the back of the aircraft. When you work for a smaller company and you're flying it, you really feel the changes. You can turn on a crisper dime. You have a little bit more freedom. You're not on a dedicated airway. You're kind of using your own intuition. And look, not everyone likes using their own intuition, or they don't have the confidence to do so. That's okay. Some of that's learned. But if you have a taste for a little bit of the wild side, and you want to test yourself and see, okay, my decisions are going to be way more impactful. Yes, they are. Start or move to a smaller company. Now, not everyone can make that transition. When I came here, I'm not going to name names or call out my people that followed me in here or some of the people we've hired since. But one of the first things I say to people when I know they started at big companies coming here, I get into that part of it.
Yeah.
If you even lack a little bit of confidence in your decision making or have a little bit of fear that, no, I'm going to mess it up, don't come to places like this because you're expected to wear 9 hats. And if that doesn't excite you a little bit, like listen to me, I'm getting animated. Like I like that part of the world. Now, small company to big company. I was 33 when US Bank bought a GenPass. And so I had 6 or 7, whatever years of smaller company experience. And now I'm in this big ocean. And I was just used to making decisions. And I did get in trouble. Everyone has a different version of this, but we started a veteran program because we wanted to. We didn't ask anyone's permission. I think I told you a little bit of this. We were just sending care packages like crazy. And then the people in Minneapolis called saying, Patrick, your mailroom costs are exploding. Like, what is happening? Oh, well, we're sending hundreds of pounds of care packages to Iraq and Afghanistan. They're like, well, did you get anyone's permission to do that? Well, no, I just did it. That's not necessarily a business decision, but I was spending the company's money without following the path. So it depends on your personality. And you know what? I kept doing stuff like that, but I just got better politically at broadcasting my intentions, not necessarily seeking permission, but broadcasting my intentions. And that's a version of courageousness. It's a ask for forgiveness later mentality. As long as you're not breaking the law and it's not unethical and you're following your own moral compass and you know it's good for the company and the brand and the associates and the customers, have the courage to do it regardless. And if somebody comes down on you saying you shouldn't have done that, that's bad, then maybe you shouldn't work there. How's that for honesty? Because corporations need more personality in them. Particularly in today's day and age when corporations don't necessarily have the best reputation for a million reasons, people with a little color in their personality and a little, pep in their step and like going to work and helping customers and coworkers be better, bring your authentic self into those big places. Maybe you won't be the bright shining spotlight you would in a smaller company, but someone's going to see it. And if you can lay your head down on the pillow at the end of the night because you accomplished something where others didn't think the big machine would move the way you wanted, sometimes 1 degree of course correction's a lot in a big company. Smaller company, more onus and responsibility. I compare it to throwing a rock in a pond versus a rock in the ocean. You throw a rock into a pond, your wake goes out further. The ripples of the wave from the rock hitting. You throw a rock in the ocean, it does this. Big company, small company. So if you're not comfortable heaving your ideas or your rocks into that small pond and really affecting all sides of the pond, because you will in decision making at every level of a company like we're at now, everybody could impact its success and failure by the minute. And some people are like, oh, I don't like that. Okay, know that about yourself. So anyway, my commentary is around ingenuity and courageousness as it relates to how you want your career to go and the decisions you make. And you know what? If you try it out, at least you know. Yeah. At least you know. And then you can say, hey, I tried it. My last comment, and then you can take it, Rachel, and bring us home. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. And there's a million videos on YouTube. You don't need to listen to us. I mean, Derek Jeter, I think he was at the University of Michigan this past week talking about how many times he failed. And I'm a Yankees fan. I even keep my Yankee jersey on my chair, everybody. So I'm a big Jeter guy. And he was saying, look at the guys in the Hall of Fame. They got it right 3 out of 10 times. And that's a Hall of Fame career. 300 batting average. That means you missed 7 times or flew out or whatever. I mean, that's a heck of a way to live. And there's a million of those stories. Admiral Craven, a SEAL when he was at the University of Texas, his commencement speech from the University of Texas, I want to say it was 15 years ago, is probably one of the best commencement speeches I've ever heard. And for the producers, if you guys can find it or I'll send it to you, you should put it in the link. And just listen to take the chance. Don't be the guy standing on the sideline watching or the girl on the sideline watching. Get in the game. Big company, small company, put yourself out there. Someone doesn't like it, that probably means you're doing the right thing, by the way. It's usually where the noise comes from. So anyway, enjoy your careers and pick your poison and enjoy it.
We pick our topics based on what we imagine is on the minds of many, but we are not mind readers. So please use our form, which we'll link for you in the show notes, to suggest additional topics we should consider, request to be a guest on our show, or give us constructive criticism, which will make our podcast more valuable for many. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Thank you for painting such vivid pictures of the transition in both directions. It really, I think you gave people some things to think about, right? In different ways that maybe they haven't considered. It's funny, as you were talking about mistakes, right, that people make. So when I went from small company to big company, I didn't necessarily know all the rules of how to behave in corporate America. And, when you work for such a giant ship, right, it's really a machine. There are these unwritten social norms, right, on how to do things and the right things to do things and who's allowed to speak up. And if you need approval for something, who you need to ask. And I've always been a person who was never intimidated by people's titles, right? I believe everyone puts their pants on the same way in the morning. And if you ask me a question, I'll give you an answer. And I don't know, it's got me in trouble a little bit. As recently as 10 years ago, I've sat in front of some senior generals and admirals in the US military and told them what I think about, how they should better prepare veterans for careers in the civilian workforce. I'm
sure they appreciated that.
Well, they're people, right? People are people.
Yeah.
And you're not, just because you have a more important title, that doesn't mean that,
that's right,
I shouldn't share. So that's gotten me in trouble at certain points. But one example is when I moved to a bigger company from a smaller company, I was on a call and I was invited to join. I don't remember what it was. It was like evaluating a new background check vendor kind of situation, something similar. And there were more people who were senior than I on this call. And I don't know, we were going back and forth on, the project and what we needed. And there was a time when the vendor or the people that were presenting it asked a question, and it got really awkward because all the important people who were supposed to know everything on the call weren't answering the questions, probably because they weren't close enough to the work. And it was like this awkward silence. And I knew the answer because this was something that I did in my job. And I just spoke up and gave the answer. And I got summoned into a senior leader's office afterwards. And they said, Rachel, that was very forward of you. We don't expect someone with your title to speak up before the director or the senior director or whoever it was. Just looked at them like, what do you mean? Like, we were trying to accomplish something for the company. And somebody asked a question and I knew the answer and nobody else knew the answer. I don't expect a whole parade for being the one who knew the answer. I was just trying to be helpful. Because otherwise you would have this call where nobody's speaking. And then what happens next? And so I got this lecture on how to navigate environments and how to show respect for authority and people's titles. And I walked out of there and I was really confused and part of it was naivete, right? Not having experienced the egos and the power dynamic of what happens in some big companies. But I was really sort of like, it seems like a waste of time. And ultimately, this project is going to take 10 times longer if we play games. Like, it felt like games to me, and I didn't like it. But I've just stepped into those kinds of things before. I've gotten a reputation. One of my bosses, and JT,
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to see the look on your face,
right? I know. And another story. So I was actually, I won't mention the name of the company, but when I moved on, so sometimes when you leave a company, all of a sudden you realize how much everyone appreciates you, right? You get all these messages like, wow, we're so sad to lose you, and we'll get, so, that
should be an episode by itself.
You're right. Let's add it to the list. And it's like, we should tell people how we appreciate them when they still work here. But anyway, one of the comments that my boss got about me when I was leaving this company, and she told it to me laughing, was Rachel was always very forward for someone at her level. Most people didn't speak up the way she did. And I'm like, thanks. So I don't think she actually meant it as a compliment, but I took it as one. So
some of that's generational. Like,
yes.
I remember I sent an email to some bosses and I didn't have them in order of their rank in the two part of the email. Because I didn't care.
Yeah.
It was just, there they are. And my boss called me in and said, that wasn't politically right. I'm like, what? This was like 1997. So back. I was like 26 years old or whatever. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, this person was the president and this person's a senior vice president. And I'm like, what? So it's a little similar.
I know. People are people. So part of it is also personality, right? You called yourself a maverick. I've been referred to as a renegade, right?
I was called that.
Yes.
I was called that. Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's a compliment, right? So I was referred to as a renegade sometimes, right? And it means that we don't accept the status quo, that we're always looking for a way around it, a way to do things better, a way to beat the system. And some rules that hold people back or serve as constraints for success, we might see them as more fluid, right, than other people do, right? They see it as a brick wall that you can't crash through. And we see it as like a partition that you can just push aside and get out of the way. It's a vision how we see reality. The bigger question, though, of all this is, obviously there's big companies and there's small companies and there's medium companies. And some people might be team big company only. I've known people that could not thrive in a smaller company because they need the structure, they need the predictability, they need the resources, right? So besides for that, that's more of like the systematic, orderly type of work environment. The other part that they enjoy is more of they prefer to do the icing on the cake rather than putting together the basic ingredients, right? So they want a company where everything's already humming and working and smoothly, and then they get to do the more advanced and specialized work. Some of those people also are specialists versus generalists, right? So they don't want to be a general manager. They want to be the senior director of this tiny little micro aspect within the technology product marketing organization, right? Whereas in a smaller company, you would do a little bit of everything. So I think sometimes there's that, and then there's some people who could be fine in both. And, the question that I think of always is it better to start in a big company and then move to a small company? Or is it better to do it the other way around? And I think that for some people, it may not matter. For others, it might be depending on what your goal is. What I've been seeing a lot of is people who've built careers in larger companies. They've seen what good looks like in a lot of environments. So they've seen what good looks like when you are fully resourced, when you are fully staffed, when you've got more money than God, right? And when you can actually almost do anything that you want.
Where's that?
Yeah, right. There are some big companies that feel like that, right?
Yeah,
and especially if you're positioned in the business units that are poised for growth, right? If they're customer facing, if you're working on their core products, right? And you see all of that, and then you can take your learnings and lessons with you to smaller companies. So a lot of people who've grown careers at those big companies and either get frustrated or get laid off end up coming to small companies to consult, right? They can take a broad variety of experiences and look there. I think, the opposite is also interesting, where some people say, no, I want to get my hands dirty and start at a smaller company. And that's where I really get a chance to learn, right? So I might not get the formal training and the structure. I might not necessarily get a boss who knows more than I do. So I might miss out on that type of learning. But on the other hand, I'll get to try and fail, right? And experiment. And then, right, take that experience to another bigger company.
That was some really good stuff that I didn't think about. But if you go look at it from a career perspective, and I usually do, I wouldn't have been able to do the work at US Bank and Fiserv I did as the people I was responsible for kept growing and growing and growing. I started in my late 20s managing 100 people. And I've already said in other pods that I was promoted way too soon. But those types of companies do that to you. It is throw them in the deep end of the pool, and if they swim, great. And if they drown, throw another body in. There ain't no life preserver coming. That's the tightrope you walk when you work at an entrepreneurial environment, right? If you swing back to the bigger companies I was at, being a jack of all trades, master of none makes you very useful.
Yeah.
Because you just naturally drift into things that others may say, well, that's that person's job. I've never had that attitude. And it started in the military. Like, they teach you a lot of things as a young person, and you have a ton of responsibility early. I mean, I was 18, 19 years old I had millions of dollars of equipment I was responsible for. And if they would have known how I behaved in high school, I can't believe the United States government gave me that responsibility, but they did. So when I got to work, I kind of had that mindset. Yeah, I'll do it. I was like Mikey, if you guys are old enough to remember the cereal commercial. Give it to Mikey, he'll eat anything. I think it's a Life cereal commercial. And I just kept doing it and doing it. I just kept taking, I'll do it, I'll try it, I'll figure it out. And, particularly in a big company, that gets you noticed.
Yeah.
So from a career perspective, if you're listening, and no matter where you start, if you like being a master of something like Rachel was describing, I like this, I just want to do this, be proud of that and go hard at it. But if you're career chasing or career climbing or whatever, know a little about a lot. Well, I've not seen experts in banking or payments really climb, but maybe they didn't want to. They just like being experts in this thing. I'm not an expert in anything, and I'm honest about it, right? So smaller companies give you an opportunity to try a lot of things out. There's a surcharge-free network called MoneyPass. And this company, GenPass, the VC one I told you about, our CEO, Bipin Shah, God rest his soul, He wanted to come up with a surcharge-free network. He was a visionary guy. He was that kind of CEO, just one new idea after another. He was the guy that was involved in pay at the pump with Sun Oil up in Philadelphia back in the late 70s, early 80s, a founder of our industry. And being 32 years old and sitting in a room with that guy and his team as they literally out of thin air created a surcharge-free network that still runs today, that Fiserv owns, was something I never would have got a chance to do at a big company because I didn't have the rank and I didn't have the experience and I certainly didn't have the brains for it at the time. I could now because the people in the room built our industry. They built Star and Honor and all the big interchanges that are out there running that no one's probably ever heard of, but it's what the industry is really founded on from a network perspective and listening and learning. And some of them had patience to teach me what they were doing. If I was at US Bank and we tried to do something like that, we'd probably never finish it. Now, it's not a bang on US Bank or other banks like it. It's just when you got 7 people in a room trying to create something versus 700, making up the numbers, you're going to move more swiftly at a smaller company. So you got to plug that into your career toolkit. Like, do you want to get thrown into the deep end of the pool and be in meetings that you probably shouldn't be in? The answer should be yes if you want a career. If you're the smartest one in the room or the room's in control, you're in the wrong room.
Yes.
Go seek rooms where the brain power intimidates you. And I've had a career of that. My last boss at Fiserv was so freaking smart. It was hard keeping up with him sometimes. So I've been counseled, Patrick, stop saying that. You're a smart guy. I'm just telling everybody. Yeah. If you have a feeling in you that you're in a room of great intelligence or action-oriented people, that's a good thing. If you're in the room and everything's just real comfortable and you're flipping your pen around and you're not having to really pay attention that hard because you're already down the road mentally, then you're probably in the wrong room. And you should use that as a barometer inside to choose where and what you want to do with your time. Life is so short. Life is so short, sadly. So pick wisely. Don't work somewhere where you're just miserable because if you're calling something boring, it might mean that you need a little bit more input coming at you, or you putting input out into the world. And sometimes it means you need to make a change. And it's okay to taste many different things. So anyway, it depends on what you're seeking.
It's true. So a couple of quick takeaways. Big companies, small companies, there's pluses and minuses at both. And you might be team big company or team small company entirely, or you might thrive in either. I would encourage you, think about what you're looking for, right? If you're someone who's just starting out in your career and you're not really sure what you want to do, a small company might be a great place to figure it out because you'll get a chance to play in lots of different sandboxes. If you have a very good sense of what you want to do, but you want to gain a really strong footing in whatever it is you're doing, a big company might be better because there will be formal training, you'll have mentors, you'll have more resources, right, at your disposal to accomplish whatever it is you know your craft wants to be. So you may not need to decide early on in your career, or as you move on and you're towards the middle of your career, and as Patrick said, you're feeling a little bored, you're looking for something new, it might be great to make a swap. Just go in with your eyes open and know what to expect.
Let me jump in right there and say, be wise in the questions you ask.
Yes.
Not all big companies are good at training. Like, don't go into an interview, small company or big company, or an engagement with either assuming anything.
Right.
You should write down the 5 things that are super important to you. If you need a person that needs like a real classroom education about how to do something, you better ask if that's supplied. Like, I know I use a lot of action words, everybody, and Rachel knows this, but I wasn't kidding about being thrown into the deep end of the pool. And if you can swim, you can swim. If you can't, you can't. A lot of companies are like that. So if you think you're joining a big old company and you're going to get months of education on how to do your job, you better ask. You may not. There's your ability to tap dance. Like, if you're not good at that, make the good choice for the employer that's seeking to employ you and for you personally. Yeah. You may have to figure things out. And if you're not good at inventing things on the fly, which they may be wanting from you, maybe they won't say it naturally. You need to make sure you're asking at least the top. You're not going to get all your boxes checked, but try to get 3 to 5 that are super important to you and ask very clearly, do you guys offer this? Now, if they say, no, we want you to figure it out and that excites you, congratulations. Go have fun. But if that's going to make you upset, don't do it. Not all big companies train you. That's changed, Rachel, a lot. I know you know that.
No, it's true. It's true. Awesome. Anyway. This was a great conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have input or if you have questions on topics you want us to cover next time, please tell us. We appreciate your feedback and we want to make this better. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to Leadership and Motivation Unleashed. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and review. It only takes 1 minute and it helps the show grow and reach more leaders like you in search of advice and motivation.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Please remember to share with your friends and family and coworkers, mentors, trusted advisors. This show is for everybody. See you next time.